Hi, this is part two of creating, I mean, this is part two of a culture of economic consciousness, the power in our choices. Okay. So, like I was saying in part one, the first choice that we must make is to be a good parent. Okay. And I can go on about this issue of being a good parent and the tragedy of unwanted children and how dare we as a civilization even allow such a thing to happen. It's shocking, okay, to say the least. Okay, so then the second choice is making the choice to be a good partner. Okay, and this I think just speaks for itself. You must be someone who is able to be held accountable and who is also able to hold people accountable. And what's very important is that you have to feel safe to hold a person accountable, and also to be held accountable, you must also feel safe. Okay. Now, a lot of the issues that people have when it comes to being viable partners are issues that are born in childhood. Either they didn't have people to emulate a good partner, or they saw a kind of partnership model that, okay, obviously not having good people to emulate, but where it was all about what you can extract from the other person in a way that is not necessarily to their benefit. So essentially learning how to be a parasite. And also, in terms of being held accountable, how much accountability did you see mirrored? What did you see happen when people were being held accountable? Did they take responsibility, or did they lash out and do the Darvo dance, which is to deny, I can't remember now, DARVO, but it's what narcissists do. Okay, deny accountability and then reverse offender and victim. Okay, victim and offender. So did you see that happening? So all these things mean you have to interrogate yourself and ask yourself, why do I not feel safe to be held accountable? What shame comes up within me? And obviously this is something which is born in childhood, because, in line with Umuntu Ngumuntu Ngabantu, we're talking about how the fact that you are because of other people, and the people who are your primary influence and the most important influence and the most uplifting influence, the influence that will affirm your life or destroy your life potentially, are your parents. Okay, so how you saw them being partners, how you saw them take accountability, how you saw them holding people accountable is very important. So people who are afraid to be held accountable, they usually have a very deep sense of shame because their parents did things to them that made them feel ashamed for being a human being. Maybe they also learned in church, and when they went home, their parents just basically reinforced the crazy stuff of the social guard system that they were taught about themselves, and they were taught to be extremely ashamed of themselves. And then the things that maybe were done to them, whether mental, emotional, physical, or psychological, or financial abuse, made them feel ashamed of themselves. They were held accountable in a way that was not conducive to building them up as people and teaching them, but in a way that diminished them and made them feel completely inadequate and unlovable. Okay, so holding someone like that accountable is a very difficult thing. And if you also grew up in that type of household, but instead of you internalizing your shame in a way that made you seek to deny it, and so you always had to be seen as perfect, and when people didn't see you as perfect, then you became very upset and threatened, you might be someone who internalized that shame, but in a way that made you feel like you always have to prove that you're not a shameful person, and that you're actually good, and that you're lovable, and that you're worthy of love. So you would probably be afraid to hold someone accountable because you feel like they will abandon you, because your parents would probably have abandoned you for being not the perfect child that they wanted, and you constantly striving to be perfect. And being perfect means doing whatever you need to do to make your parents happy, because kids depend on their parents for life. And so in your partnership, you'll be someone who people pleases and doesn't know how to hold people accountable. So these things require us to look at ourselves internally. Why am I like this? And how do I work on myself so that I am a strong person who feels safe, what is it that didn't make me feel safe? It's a whole lot of stuff. Okay. And then the last one, being a good friend to myself, is all about also holding yourself accountable and doing things that are good for you, even though they are hard. Like if you're an addict, as a good friend to yourself, you need to work on why it is that you're an addict. You need to seek help. You need to go to therapy, support groups, so that you can become the best version of yourself, so that you have the utmost capacity to realize your potential, and why it is that you came to this planet. So it's very important that you will sit with yourself when you're feeling a negative emotion, and this is also, sorry, my video cut. I was out of memory on my phone. Anyway, so as I was saying, to be the best friend to yourself, you need to hold yourself accountable, essentially. Okay. And so like the thing is that I think there's a lot going on in this world, that is distracting us from being good to ourselves, good to others, good to the children. And I think one of the very important things that have happened to humanity is to make us believe that our free will doesn't actually exist or doesn't actually belong to us. Make us feel like our free will is kind of like it's something that can be taken away from us and is something that we can give up. And unfortunately, organized religion has done a great deal to facilitate this type of indoctrination. The truth is, our free will is the most powerful thing and is one of the pillars of creation. Because if you're coming into a world, right, as a spiritual being like Earth, where you have to grapple with all sorts of experiences in order for your soul to evolve and for your soul to achieve its mission, you have to have free will. You have to have the capacity to create circumstances for you to fulfill the mission for which you came to this earth. Okay. And also, those who seek to thwart your free will are held accountable. Maybe they're not held accountable to your knowledge. They're not held accountable while they are still on this planet, but they are held accountable. And these are types of things that we don't get taught in organized religion. You basically get taught that you should hand over your free will to God and then let God guide you. But even the act of handing over your free will to God so he can guide you is a free will choice. Okay. So it is about really understanding what is our free will, what is within our capacity to decide on. And essentially that is anything that has to do with you and the people, places and things that you choose to interact with. Okay. Your free will does not extend to other people. And this is where, for example, choosing to be a good parent, it's very important to understand that people think being a good parent is imposing a worldview and a set of values on your child, which are all about promoting your own prestige and interests. That is not what it means to be a good parent. And this is why I think probably of all the things, this is the thing that people need to interrogate about themselves, and we as a society need to interrogate, because the children are suffering, which means these children are growing up to be adults who are full of trauma and people who are not able to be held accountable, who find it difficult to hold other people accountable, and then chaos ensues. You know what I'm saying? And it's very difficult to be economically productive in any meaningful way, spiritually, emotionally, physically, when there is chaos. You need peace in order to be productive. Okay. And so I think as people, we are called upon at this time, because, the amount of information that exists is something which the universe is very much aware of and will hold us accountable when we are making choices that are not for our highest good and the highest good of all. Because before, people were able to say, well, we didn't know, we didn't have information. And that was true. Now you can find out pretty much anything at the click of a button. So we are being held accountable much more robustly. And it is very important that we take this seriously, because things can go very badly very quickly if we continue to ignore our responsibility as human beings to make the right choices. Thank you.